Donald Trump, for essentially 10 years now, has been denouncing and criticizing the endless wars, unnecessary wars that the United States fights in general. We showed you the video last night where he was running and said he intends to be the peacemaker. He was very proud of the fact that he didn't involve the U.S. in any new wars in his first term, which is true. I've noted that many times. And in particular, in the Middle East, his view is that we have fought constant wars unnecessarily in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya. And these are the kinds of wars that Trump and his supporters vowed that they didn't want any more of. And yet, as we reported last night at length, Trump took Biden's bombing campaign in Yemen and restarted it and massively escalated it, even though Trump criticized Biden for bombing Yemen at a time when Yemen and the Houthis were actually attacking American ships. At least Biden had that pretext. The Houthis' position now is they stopped attacking ships once there was a ceasefire in Gaza, and they only restarted once the Israelis violated that ceasefire by refusing to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza and said, we intend to attack only Israel-flagged ships, not even American ships. And yet now Trump is doing exactly what he criticized Biden for doing without even the pretext of protecting American ships, because the only ships that the Houthis are attacking and that they intend to attack, according to them, are Israeli ships. So you have that outbreak of war in the Middle East. And now you have a ceasefire that Donald Trump, by all accounts, was instrumental in fostering, to his credit. One that took place right before he was inaugurated. He sent his very aggressive Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, who pushed around the Israelis in a way that no American has done in quite some time to get this deal done. And the deal was in stages. A first stage of the ceasefire that involved the exchange of hundreds of Palestinians kept in dungeons with no trial inside Israel that get released, and then Hamas releases what are called hostages, even though a lot of those people were in active military duty, are typically called prisoners of war because it's Israel, and Hamas, we call them hostages. They have civilians as well. And then they would move to a second stage, and in this first stage, the Israelis would withdraw from all of Gaza. They would allow humanitarian aid to enter, and they would negotiate for that second ceasefire. Almost immediately, Israel began violating this deal. They withdrew from much of Gaza, but not all of it. They started occasionally bombing and then frequently bombing Gaza, which obviously is not consistent with the ceasefire. And they also, basically Netanyahu came out when that deal was signed, and there were a lot of people to his right, the right-wing parties in his government, who were vehemently opposed to the deal, and he essentially told them and said in public, don't worry, this is not a permanent ceasefire. Trump has told us we are free to start bombing them again, and that's exactly what we intend to do once we get our hostages back. And now that is exactly what is happening. The Israelis yesterday unleashed a massive bombing campaign on Gaza, unlike anything that has been seen since before the ceasefire ended. They killed at least 300 people. As usual, families wiped out, many women and children killed. There's barely anything left in Gaza. 92% of Gaza has been destroyed, and yet the Israelis are still finding things to bomb and people to kill, even though there was supposedly a ceasefire agreement in place. Here from NBC News, the headline is, Israel breaks ceasefire deal with new deadly strikes. Video captured by NBC News' crew on the ground shows frantic scenes at Khan Yunis's Nasser hospital in southern Gaza with children among the killed. Same thing we saw for 15 months. Quote, the health ministry in Hamas-ruled Gaza, whose figures the World Health Organization has previously said it considers to be reliable, said hospitals across the enclave have received the bodies of at least 404 people killed, with more than 560 injured. That's almost 1,000 people killed or injured in one day. It added that people were still buried under rubble, with recovery efforts underway. Dr. Munir al-Borish, the ministry's director general, said, quote, most of the victims were women and children, as he called on Gaza's residents to donate blood. Here is the office of Prime Minister Netanyahu posting an announcement yesterday, quote, the IDF is, at this time, attacking targets of the Hamas terrorist organization throughout the Gaza Strip in order to achieve the objectives of the war as they have been determined by the political echelon, including the release of all of our hostages, the living and the deceased. That wasn't the ceasefire deal. The ceasefire deal was they would release hostages in stages while the Israelis released the detainees, Palestinian detainees, inside Israeli detention camps, which are among the most brutal places in the world. That's where videos showed that IDF soldiers were raping IDF soldiers. There was a protest, including by people in the Knesset, in defense of those soldiers, saying, under Jewish law, under our national interest, we have the right to rape Palestinians. They actually had protests along those lines, arguments on their shows that rape is a legitimate weapon of war. And these are Palestinians who were detained, some prior to October 7th, but virtually none of them with any due process at all. So the idea was they would be released in conjunction with hostages being released from Gaza in accordance with a schedule. And all of a sudden the Israelis said, and Trump said, either you release all of those hostages immediately, or we're going to rain down hell on you. Here is Abu Bakr Abed, the journalist in Gaza whom we interviewed, who posted online video of some of the bombs going off in Gaza. That was not a very impressive video. I'm sure are better videos because there was bombs all over. You could sort of hear the bombs in the background is what the point was, that you could hear things blowing up in the background. I don't know if you were able to hear that. But in any event, there's no question that Israel engaged in mass destruction. There's tons of videos online of families wiped out, of buildings destroyed, whatever remaining buildings were left. Here from the Wall Street Journal, confirming that Trump gave the green light to all of this. An Israeli official said that President Trump gave Israel the green light to restart attacks on Hamas after the U.S. designated terrorist group failed to give up hostages. Israel then gave the U.S. a heads up before starting the operation, the official said. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed on Fox News that Israel had given advance notice of the attacks. She warned Hamas and other regional enemies of Israel and the U.S. will, quote, see a price to pay. Quote, all hell will break loose, she said, repeating a threat often made by Trump. For those keeping a score at home, a combination of Israel and the United States, remember the United States is providing the arms for these Israel bombing campaigns, is paying for it as they did under Biden, as they're doing under Trump. So the combination of Israel and the U.S. right now in the Middle East are bombing Yemen, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, and Syria, while they explicitly threaten Iran with massive bombing campaigns as well. That's 6 different countries in the Middle East that the United States and the Israelis are now jointly and actively bombing. From a president who vowed that he would be the peacemaker, that we had to stop the posture of endless war. Here was Trump on Air Force One in February, essentially describing what he told Netanyahu.
I told Bibi, you do whatever you want because, my statement was they got to come back. Now, the reason I made that statement because they said they weren't going to deliver, they were not going to deliver the people that they said they were going to deliver, that they agreed to deliver. And they did agree to do that, but they broke that agreement. When I made the statement, they delivered everybody plus an American. Now, the good news is they look like they're in pretty good shape because the people from the week before didn't look like they were in good shape. They look like Holocaust survivors, frankly. Horrible. Whatever happened to them was horrible. But that'll be up to Israel what the next step is in consultation with.
Now, if you compare, supposedly Trump was affected by the condition of some of the hostages that were released They were gaunt and thin. I don't know why that's surprising. The Israelis announced at the start of the war that they would prevent all food from getting into Gaza. They have made good on that in many ways. Blocked humanitarian trucks the entire time. But the vast majority of the hostages who were released from Gaza and returned to Israel looked quite healthy, looked infinitely better, in fact, than the way the Palestinians who are released from these Israeli dungeons look. They look completely broken physically and mentally. And many of the hostages who came back gave interviews in Israel saying, we were treated well. When our captors ate, we also ate. We shared food. Sometimes there were food shortages. But you can just compare how they look. The Palestinians who are released to how the Israelis are released. They were looking from a pretext from the beginning in order to restart the war. Here's Netanyahu himself on January 18th, so basically the day that the ceasefire was signed, and you see what Netanyahu is saying about it and what Trump, according to him, told him as well.
Since he was elected, Trump was completely committed to the release of the hostages. We spoke on Wednesday. He congratulated me on the agreement, and he emphasized, and rightly so, that the first stage is a temporary ceasefire. This is what he said, a temporary ceasefire. Towards the next stages of the agreement, we are holding on to some significant assets so that we can bring back all of the hostages and in order to accomplish all the goals of the war. Both President Trump and President Biden have provided full backing to Israel's right to resume fighting, to resume combat if Israel reaches the conclusion that the negotiations over the second stage are pointless. I truly appreciate that. I also appreciate the decision of President Trump to lift all the remaining restrictions on the providing of essential munitions and weapons to the state of Israel. If we need to resume combat, we will do so in new ways, and we will do so with tremendous force.
Now, before this war, it's worth remembering, there was extreme civil strife in Israel. There were huge battles, in particular over the question of the independence of the judiciary. The judiciary has always had the right of judicial review over the Knesset and laws that they passed. They were trying to eliminate that. People were out in the streets every day saying our democracy is being destroyed. On top of that, Netanyahu had all kinds of legal and criminal charges, including for corruption and bribery. And it was only October 7th, and there's still the question of how could October 7th possibly have happened, given Israel's supreme status as the surveillance capital and the fact that they have Gaza completely under surveillance, and an attack of that magnitude happened. But it was only once October 7th happened did the country unite behind Netanyahu, did all of those problems go away. And now that the ceasefire was in place, these scandals started to return. Netanyahu was forced to go to criminal court and testify. Others were as well. He just fired the director of the Shin Bet, the Israeli intelligence service, because he was threatening Netanyahu that he would make public lots of wrongdoing that Netanyahu was engaged in. Netanyahu is basically using this war to ward off the end of his stay in power and potentially the end of his freedom. And that's what makes what they're doing in Gaza particularly repulsive, particularly inhumane, particularly criminal. That they have destroyed essentially all of Gaza, left basically the whole population of 2 million people, however many people are left, without homes, without any civil society. They blocked food and electricity, meaning they have no food or water getting into the Gaza Strip. The war itself, the conduct in which it was carried out, was found to be war crimes by the International Criminal Court in the United States, out of loyalty to Israel, immediately sanctioned the ICC, punished them, threatened them, but that was the finding. And the fact that Netanyahu himself, and this is what many, many Israelis believe and Israeli newspapers say all the time, is motivated by lots of things. One of the primary motives that he has is protecting himself and shielding himself from accountability for a lot of the corruption and criminal cases that he faces. And here we have Trump brought in to end wars, who now has the United States involved in 5 or 6 different bombing campaigns in the Middle East alone. Free speech is under attack. Any viewer of this show knows that very well, but Rumble refuses to back down. We've always believed in empowering voices, no matter how unpopular, and now Rumble is taking that fight to the next level. When major advertisers conspired to pull their dollars in response to media attacks, even brands like Dunkin' Donuts turned their backs, claiming that Rumble had a, quote, right-wing culture. But Rumble is not here to fit a mold. Instead, it's here to defend free expression. To strengthen this mission, we're excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. You'll find exclusive content from creators like Russell Brand, Dr. Disrespect, Tim Cast, and the Mug Club with Crowder. It's more than a subscription. It's a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. Join Rumble Premium. For a very limited time, you can get $20 off an annual plan using the promo code RumbleLive. Visit rumble.com/premium and claim your special sale discount today. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.